Once we begin, the candidates will go to a separate holding area, and then they will come on stage one at a time in alphabetical order. Now, they will be sequestered off stage so that they can't hear the candidates that precede them, so there's not an advantage that they would receive by going later because we will be in alphabetical order. I'll read a brief biography of each candidate as they come on stage. Each candidate will address the audience for 10 minutes. We've asked the candidates for the first 3 to 4 minutes to tell us why they are running for this office. And the balance of their time, we hope that they'll then use to fill us in on what will be some of their agricultural policy priorities should they be elected. If a candidate does not use all their 10 minutes, I may ask a follow-up question to fill out that time if need be. Now, this is not a debate. There won't be questions from the audience. We do ask that you be respectful of each candidate's time. We ask you to hold your applause till the end of their presentation. At this time, I'd like to ask the candidates to go with Kevin Brown and Lee Thorne of Farm Bureau to the holding area. Mr. Acox, would you please join me on the stage? Michael is running as a Democrat. At the age of 13, Michael began understanding hard work on his family's dairy farm at Newton, Mississippi. Since then, his hard work and work ethics has taken him across the world in life and the U.S. Navy. Although young in age, Michael's life and military experience thrust his understanding of what is needed for the people of Mississippi and the 3rd District. After returning home, Michael saw the problems in the world and knew that he had 2 options: do nothing or do something, and he has chosen to do something.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so the first little bit, according to this, is I guess supposed to be telling you about me and my aspect of farming, and well, you just kind of went through it mostly. I started, like I said, at 13, and that was just when I started getting paid.
Yeah, I imagine.
You know that feeling there. Before that, I learned to drive on, the David Brown, the no air conditioner and the fun that you sit out there under the sun with. But so I spent the last 4 years in the United States Navy. It's truly been an honor to serve our country, and I came home, 100% disabled veteran. I exposed to some things that the military is part of it, and I said, hey, you know what? I've got to do something. And I am running on the Democratic seat, and I love my country. I love my state, and that's part of the reason why I'm running. My family has a big history with Farm Bureau. My grandmother, I called her to make sure I got it right, because she takes pride in those things. I heard growing up, all about going to Washington. I'm like, man, what did she go to Washington for? She was the women's chair for Newton County. And they were both on the board, and they went back many years ago. I asked them, I said, well, what year was it? And they said, well, I don't have a clue. They said, that's been way too long ago. So we do have a history of farming. And then your next little bit.
Well, now, why are you running for this office? What commends you to the people of the 3rd District?
Commends me to the people of the 3rd District. Well, I've been here my whole life. My family's here goes back to 1868. Came over after a smallpox in Alabama and came over. And so they settled on the place where we call home now. And but now what makes me want to serve in a congressional seat? Man, I absolutely want to do whatever it takes to serve our people. I keep using the word serve because service before self is something that's ingrained in our head in the military, whether it's me, whether it's any service member. And coming home in the disability status, you're trying to figure out where do I fit into this grand scheme of it all. And you know what? Somebody's got to do it. And when Congressman Harper stepped down, hey, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to step up to the plate.
In terms of agricultural policy, are there any things, I'll let you have a free one, any ag policy that you can think of that you specifically want to make sure that you address when you get to Washington?
So there's a couple things that I sat through, and figuring out what the Democrats going to say to the Farm Bureau group out here is kind of the fun task set before me, just to be quite honest. So I sat there and I said, what would be the 3 things that I would say? And as a congressman, we're leaders. And I said, well, what would be, if I were to define first a leader, I said, well, there's 2 types of leaders. we have the boss. We have a leader. We have, in the Navy, we call it a deck plate leader. You'll see me quote it quite a bit, but it's a guy that's willing to get his hands dirty. He's not scared to get down and fight. And so I came up with 3 things that I said that really we kind of had to address, and I think it relates to the farmer. And that's that there are 3 things that a person, politician, or farmer must do to have a successful harvest. First and foremost, must be willing to use a shovel. Second, he's got to prepare themselves for the sun. And the third, he's got to brace for the storm. And now that we're in this kind of text of talking about the whole dynamic, I think the willingness to use the shovel, and the thing that kind of plagued my mind, obviously I'm the young candidate, so I'm going to have a lot of experience with Facebook and Twitter and all the things of that nature. But several years ago, there was an app on Facebook called Farmville. Farm Bureau should have really advertised with these guys because they sold a ton way back when. Mm-hmm. And it was for people, you may have played it, I'm not sure.
No.
You wasn't a fan. Me neither. I've actually held a hoe, so it didn't do anything for me. But the concept is that people that had never farmed could get out there, they could plant their crops, they could go tend to their neighbors' crops, they could do all these things, they could farm. And the more I thought about, and I tried to read through this omnibus bill, 2 cups of coffee, a bottle of Jack later, and no, I'm just kidding. I didn't drink the coffee. I really came to the conclusion that these guys are so out of touch with farmers. They're sitting up there in Washington playing Farmville, and I said, well, this is nuts. And so I looked back at history, and it's kind of historical. Eisenhower said, "Farming seems really easy." You know this quote. When your plow is a pencil, and you're 1,000 miles from the nearest cornfield. So I got the 5-minute note. So going back to that, one of the things is we've got to cut the red tape. So that's the incentive here, is that the farmers in the first aspect, willingness to use the shovel, they've got to cut the red tape. They've got to get down and dirty. They have to fight for the farmers. They've got to meet us where we are in Poplar Springs community. We can't forget about the sun. Now, that's the incentive that kind of comes on the Democratic-leaning side, is that I believe that the sun aspect is going to be us taking care of our people in college, our students. And the reason I say that is because this dynamic, in the omnibus, it provides money for land-grant schools, right? So we have to think that, hey, that's important. So for me, I believe that if a student maintains a 3.0 GPA, he or she should be able to go to school at the cost to the Department of Education. I know that's probably not a whole lot popular with you guys, but the incentive is there to produce a valued member of the workforce, to produce a hard worker, and that's even to include areas such as the machinist and the things of that nature that we need in the farming industry. And the last thing is the bracing for the storm part. A few years ago, we had tornadoes rip through Newton, and our tails have been kicked in this area because it's summer today and tomorrow it's going to be winter, and so we're consistently used to this strange weather. So we have to be prepared. And in the omnibus, there was one thing that I found that it talked about, and that was the SNAP program. Now, I understand the incentive and the need for it to be there, and it has to be in there to make sure that the farmers, because that's important, we got to make sure we're getting taken care of. But that to me is the storm, because I was watching the Republican debate last night, and I got really insulted. Just to tell you, most everybody I was impressed with, but I was insulted by one thing, and the thing is that one of our individuals referred to the program and said that you can get your dignity back after you get to work. In 2003, my family suffered. We went on the SNAP program. We had free lunches, and it's because of that incentive, this idea that we put off, that we were embarrassed. My brothers and I were embarrassed that our family had to suffer. So for me, the dialogue might have been offensive, but to the individual that made sure that they said that, in 2018, I'm sitting on the same stage as you. So storms are inevitable. Jesus gave us a command years ago to feed the hungry and to heal the sick. You guys in this room are the exemplification of Christ. You guys are truly what leads the nation and shows the American dream. I'm proud to be here today. I ask for your support. While we don't have storms daily, we've got to always be prepared for when they do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next candidate this evening is Senator Sally Doty, who's running on the Republican ticket. Senator Doty is serving her second term in the Mississippi Senate, where she represents Lawrence and Lincoln counties and portions of Copiah and Walthall. Senator Doty received her Juris Doctorate with distinction from the Mississippi College School of Law in 1991. She's also a graduate of the Mississippi University for Women, where she served as student body president. Originally from Kosciuszko, she was recently appointed chair of the Senate Energy Committee. Senator Doty is vice chair of the Judiciary A Committee, and she's previously served as chairman of the Senate Elections Committee. Please welcome her to the stage. Why are you running for office?
I'm running for office because of my experience that I've had in the Mississippi legislature. And also my experiences as a mom of three. I've got three young adults. My oldest is 23. My next one is 20. My youngest son, Ben, will graduate from Brookhaven High School in about a month. And so based on my experiences and where I am in my life, I made the decision to run for this office. There we go. Based on, now here we go. So based on my experiences in the Mississippi Senate and really where I am in my life right now, and after a lot of prayer, I decided to run for this office because I know what it means to be accountable to my voters for my voting record. I know what that means, and I know what it's like to balance the interests of my particular constituents and their agendas with other members who serve with me in the Senate, members of the House, and I know how to get legislation passed. That's what's really important. And as I travel around these 24 counties, it's a big district that we have, and all of us, every candidate has been visiting in those 24 counties, and people ask me the same thing. Why in the heck would you run for this, Sally? Why? Is there anything we can even do? Is it worthwhile? And I say, yes, it is worthwhile, and there is something we can do. We can send a president to D.C. who's going to turn things around, and we have done that. And we can send a strong legislator to support him, because I really think that is what this job is all about. You're going to hear that we've been at we've had a debate every night this week, or a forum every night this week. So we all have heard each other's speeches by now, and there are great folks in this race. But what it really boils down to is the ability to make, manage, and move legislation. That's what this job is. That's the job that I've had for the past 7 years. And I have a proven conservative voting record. I have a 100% pro-life voting record. I have an A rating by the NRA. I have an A rating by BIPEC, which is a business group that grades legislators each year. I have that for my business-friendly votes to reduce taxes and reduce regulations in Mississippi so our businesses can thrive and flourish. So I have a track record here in Mississippi, and it was because of that track record that I'm running for this office.
What then would be some of your agricultural policy priorities upon reaching Washington?
So I think my agricultural policy priorities are those priorities that really we are all talking about anyway: trade, immigration, and I'll be glad to enumerate on those.
Well, NAFTA, of course. Yeah. President Trump has reopened the NAFTA negotiations. There are, for corn farmers and pork and a lot of those people, NAFTA has been really good. For tomato growers, commercial tomato growers, maybe not so good. What's your opinion on NAFTA?
So those NAFTA negotiations are ongoing and have been ongoing since last fall, and I think we're about in the 8th round of talks, and they have a different chapter that they talk about each time.
And so I think it is appropriate. You know, NAFTA was enacted, I think, before the internet. I heard that. So statistic maybe.
I believe it was 93, I believe.
93?
It was
What were we
93.
doing? Maybe before, let's see. We couldn't get it on our cell phones for sure then.
Might have
Or
been a
internet on our
bag.
cell
Might have been a bag phone in the car.
So, you know, it's time for some updates. I think the real question has been whether or not the president is going to take us out of NAFTA. I think there's been some talk about that, and folks are a little worried about that. And I don't think that is the case. I don't think that will happen. I think that's the current, you know, our
Well, agriculture is worried that they're going to be a pawn in this. As I said, for a lot of the ag sector, NAFTA has been good. For some, maybe not. And of course, they would like to see some things change. And supposedly President Trump has initiated to some of the vegetable growers that he might try to do some things in that area.
So I think what it's important to remember is in all of these trade agreements, really, and with tariffs, exports, those powers really are reserved to Congress. And the president, much of that has been given over to the executive branch, but it belongs with Congress. And so there could be a vote. If there was some, you know, if the president says, oh, we're going to pull out of NAFTA, totally pull out of NAFTA, and it, you know, looks like it's going to be very detrimental to ag, I would certainly push for a vote in Congress to assert its power under the Constitution to handle that issue.
What about in terms of the internet? We all know today we carry basically the world. We can carry it in our hands. And communication can be done in that fashion, and advertising and information. I know many years ago on Farm Week, we gave a lot of prices because there was no other place to find prices. Now you can get them. What, in terms of trying to bring the internet and connectivity to rural areas, because a lot of places in Mississippi you can't get
I agree.
connectivity to the internet.
And I know that. You know, I represent 4 rural counties, Lincoln, Lawrence, Copiah, Walthall counties, and often when I'm out traveling in my district, you know, I can't get any internet. And so I understand those needs, and I do support some build-out in our rural broadband. I think there are a lot of different ways to do this. I had a very long conversation in Meadville this week with someone from Franklin Telephone Company, and we got into the real specifics about how that fiber could be built out and how some of the different user fees and different programs could be used. I know that USDA has some grants for that as well. And then I think there's also this FirstNet program that is going across the nation that is going to provide access for our emergency personnel, for law enforcement and emergency. And I think there's some opportunities with that as well to build out into more rural areas.
Let's look at the EPA. President Trump and his administration has had some rollbacks that were placed in previous administrations and some relief to farmers and landowners. If elected to Congress, would you continue this relief, and what areas of regulation would you want to look at?
I certainly would continue that. And also, I see my time is getting short, and what I want to tell you is that I have done that in the Mississippi legislature. You know, this year we passed some pretty important legislation, some right to farm legislation that would prohibit any zoning requirements that would be problematic for our agricultural industries. So certainly I would support the rollback of those regulations and have worked to do that already in where I sit right now in the Senate.
Okay, Mr. Timekeeper, are we? Okay.
Oh, we're
All right.
good.
Do we have some time left?
Oh,
2.5 minutes.
Oh,
All
okay.
right, let's keep going now. Immigration. You know, for a lot of farmers, particularly vegetable farmers, a lot of farmers that require hand labor, not only in Mississippi, but in many other parts of the country, temporary migrant workers can come in through the legal work visa called an H-2A.
Right.
And that a lot of these farmers have really come to rely on this program because local labor can't do many of these jobs. So immigration reform is obviously a very hot button issue. How would you address farmers that we don't lose access to a key program like this that could allow workers to come in and work legally?
Yes, and I understand that need and would support, there's a bill right now in Congress, it's the Securing America's Future bill that's in the House that really is the kind of all-encompassing immigration bill, and it really provides for a new class, which is H-2C, which would allow for agricultural guest workers for even a longer period of time, and I would support that. I also know the H-2A, the cap was raised this year on how many were allowed to be under that program, with a lot of the urging of our Senate delegation. And I think that's very important to understand really all of the duties of a congressman, because what you do certainly is you make legislation, but you interact with these agencies, and you will hear tonight some talk of term limits. And I am not a proponent of term limits, because in my experience and seeing how government works and talking to people in other states where there is term limits, I know that that gives lobbyists the upper hand. I mean, I don't want to take away from you. You know, y'all vote every 2 years on a congressman. I believe we have term limits. So unless we want to give unelected bureaucrats and lobbyists the upper hand, we need some folks there who can have time to figure out the process and really develop some seniority.
All right, I think that will be about the end of your time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next candidate is another Republican, Morgan Dunn. Dunn was born and raised in Magee, Mississippi, and after graduating from the University of Mississippi, she went on to work for Pioneer Health Services, an 8-hospital system located in rural areas throughout the United States. Dunn and her husband of 15 years, Chris, live in Magee, and their children are Sawyer, Ava, and Wynn. The Dunns are also members of First Methodist United Methodist Church in Magee, and their children attend Simpson Academy. They're also the proud owner of Zips Cafe, a small business in Magee, so they know that aspect of life. Dunn has also held the position of Chief Executive Officer for Rural Solutions, LLC. She's presently the founder and managing director of Vestra, LLC. Vestra is a healthcare consulting firm in Magee and currently consults with Rush Health Systems in Meridian. A strong representative for women in the business world, Dunn has been recognized as one of the 50 leading businesswomen in Mississippi. Please welcome Republican candidate Morgan Dunn.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I have figured out that there's a sign that farming and heels don't go together. On the way in, I knocked off my heel. And if I hadn't parked in the back 40, I would have gone and gotten another pair of shoes. Everybody knows what the back 40 is. To tell you a little bit about myself, there are 3 reasons why I'm your person to advocate for you in Washington, D.C. Number 1, I'm a business leader, not a politician. Who better to drain the swamp than someone that's never been a part of it? Number 2, I'm a healthcare specialist. My life's work has revolved around healthcare. I experienced firsthand the damage Obamacare did to our healthcare industry. It crippled our health systems, and it devastated rural health. Rural health is my background. I've been fighting for rural America for 15 years. Number 3, and this is the most important, I know Mississippi. I know it as a wife. I know it as a mother. I know it as a business owner. I know it as someone that lives in the back 40 of Simpson County. I'm your rural advocate. My husband and I, we've been married 15 years. We live in Magee. I've lived in Magee my entire life. We are raising our 3 kids there. They're my rock. You want to know anything about the way that I tick? Can be answered in 4 words. Sawyer, Ava, Wynn, and Chris. They are why I'm standing up here today. I'm running because there's nobody in Washington, D.C. that understands small-town America. Nobody. Our entire state is one big small town. I've spent the last 15 years championing rural health. I can tell you, the Obamas, the Hillarys, the Pelosi's, They look down at us in Mississippi. They think we bitterly cling to our guns and our God. Well, I can tell you, I'm proud to be a part of my church, Goodwater Baptist Church. It says I'm Methodist. We're still members of Methodist. I grew up in a Methodist church, but our youth is a little better at Goodwater, so we're in transition. And number two, I'm a proud, toting mother because of defense. I am a strong supporter of our Second Amendment. I'm a strong Republican. I believe that small businesses grow jobs, not government. I believe that more regulation, more red tape stifles innovation and ultimately our economy. How much time do you want me to do this?
You have 7.
Because
6
I'm
and a half.
long-winded.
6.5 minutes left.
Because you're going to ask me questions, right?
Well, if you don't fill out your time, yes.
I don't want to waste time. But I do want to get through my values.
No, you're good.
So I do believe that less regulation grows our economy, and I believe that small businesses grow our jobs and not the government. I do also believe that President Trump does not need another politician. He does not need another lawyer. He needs someone with business sense and common sense. I'm your gal. Mississippi needs someone to show Washington, D.C. what Mississippi is made of. It's our time to rise. It's our time to be great. And it's our time to get out of the high 40s and develop our infrastructure. Internet, broadband, that's huge. I've been saying that from the very beginning, since I started this race. I've been saying it for 15 years. As a small business owner, we had to put in T1 lines to run a federally mandated requirement in our hospitals. It shouldn't be on the backs of our small businesses. We have got to get Mississippi competitive so my kids, your children, your grandchildren, my grandchildren will want to stay in Mississippi. That's why I'm running. Now, I'm Morgan Dunn, and I really need your vote for June 5th primary.
Sit down. What would be an ag priority for you when you get to Washington?
I think the most important thing about ag, along with every other important Mississippi issues that we have, is the regulatory process. We have to deregulate. And when I say deregulate, I'm not talking about our rural, what's the term I'm thinking about? We get rural development dollars because of our state. We need to deregulate to help our small businesses flourish. I think that's the most important thing related to ag and related, so like the EPA. You've got Congress on the left side, and you've got the true federal divisions on the right side. That's where we struggle, is on the federal division side. We've got to deregulate those guys. And that's the only positive impact that we're going to see across our economy, no matter if it's in ag, or if it's in healthcare, or if it's in education.
So you would support, President Trump with the EPA has done some rollbacks that have benefited farmers.
Yes, absolutely. Why try and stifle our farmers or our small businesses with inappropriate regulation when you're just trying to be good stewards of your property and your cows and cattle? And I mean, that's why the government doesn't understand Mississippi, is because they don't have anybody up there that actually has been farming. Now, I'm not a farmer, but I do have 6 chickens.
Chickens are popular.
I did show pigs. I have shown pigs when I was younger.
Well, that's like herding cats.
It is.
The pigs. You did talk about the internet, and here in Mississippi, of course, I'm sure if you drove from the southwest corner of the state where the 3rd District ends and went all the way up to Starkville, that you're going to probably cross some places you can't get connectivity. So our businesses that are out in those areas need that connectivity. Do you have any ideas on how we can get that connectivity for rural Mississippians? And you talked about the fact that even for hospitals, rural hospitals don't have the access they need.
So the thing that we have to understand is the federal government has rural development dollars, program dollars, that are on the federal side that not a lot of people know about. And so we had $102 million come from the federal government to the state of Mississippi in 2015 for internet and broadband infrastructure. Do y'all know where the majority of those dollars went? That would be Benny Thompson's district. Kudos to Benny Thompson. There's federal dollars out there. We have to get them to our District 3. And it's all in the matter of where to look, who to talk to, and to get them to Mississippi's District 3. And by the way, that was 2.9% of all federal infrastructure dollars specifically for internet and broadband. So the other 97% went to the rest of the United States.
Let's see, about 1 minute left. We'll let you solve the immigration reform problem in 1 minute. A lot of farmers depend on temporary migrant workers through programs like H-2A and such as that. How can you reassure farmers that they're not going to lose access to some programs like that as this, the immigration reform encompasses so much?
Immigration reform is such a big issue. It's a big strain on our resource dollars right now. It's a strain on our health care. It's a strain on our police forces. It's just a strain on our infrastructure. But no less important to our farmers that actually need the workers because we can't get workers to support the farms. That is probably a $64 million question on how to resolve that in a minute.
Well, would you be amenable to continuing temporary migrant visas for workers? Oh, we're at the end. You lucked out on that one.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next candidate is State Representative Michael Ted Evans, running as a Democrat. Representative Evans has served District 45 since 2012. District 45 is over in the eastern part of the state, Kemper, Lauderdale, Winston, and Neshoba counties. He serves on the Agriculture, Energy, and Public Utilities and Conservation Committee and the Water Resources Committee. A graduate of Nanawaya High School and the Mississippi Fire Academy. He's a member of Mississippi Farm Bureau, the Mississippi Fire Chiefs Association, and the Mississippi Poultry Association. You'll see why in a second. He's a retired battalion chief with the city of Philadelphia, where he served for 21 years. He currently owns and operates a poultry farm in Kemper County. He's married to the former Heather Luke of Winston County. They have one daughter, Hannah Catherine, who's a student at Mississippi University for Women. They're members of the Dry Creek Baptist Church in Preston. Please welcome Michael Ted Evans.
Thank you, sir. All right.
You have, as I said, 10 minutes. Why are you running for this office?
Well, first, let me thank each one of the associations for putting this on tonight. Thank Farm Bureau for doing this for us tonight. I think I'm a member of 5 of the 6 associations that's doing this tonight, and farming is just such a big deal to Mississippi, and I'm just proud to be a part of it. My wife, I want to apologize for my wife. She's not here tonight. She usually goes with me all the time, but my daughter's battling with kidney stones. They're at the hospital now, and my daughter says if she didn't make it, that would be fine. But look, the reason I decided to run, America is the greatest country in the world. We've always been the greatest, and I believe that we'll be the greatest. But our political system is broken. It is fast broken, and the reason it's broken is all you hear in Washington is Democrats, Republicans, liberals, and conservatives. That's all they talk about. They always try to come up with a sound bite. That's what they vote on issues, just for a soundbite to try to get you to believe what they're doing when they're actually absolutely doing nothing. So I wanted to run it because I want to be the man that goes up there and tries to make a difference. I'm the type of candidate that's going to work across party lines. I've worked with Farm Bureau on every issue they've brought with me. It wasn't because it was Republican or Democrat. It was because it was an issue that affected Mississippi. That's why I want to go. Too often times we get caught up in them sound bites, and it's just running our country. And we need just a good old rural Mississippi boy that cares about rural Mississippi. I'm just an old common man with an old common plan. And that's what I'm going to be when I go to Washington. Congress is not addressing the needs of Mississippi. We got major health care problems. We got infrastructure problems, education problems, broadband. And look, they can't even come into agreement on a farm bill. How could it be complicated that you can't even reach common ground? Both parties can reach common ground on a farm bill. That affects Mississippi so much, and I don't know why they can't come to an agreement on that. And I want to go to Washington to change that.
What would be a ag priority? I mean, you've been on the ground with agriculture. What would be an ag priority for you when you get to Washington?
Let me tell you a quick story that goes into my ideas for farming. When I was 19 years old, I told my father, he'd been working me day and night for 19 years on the farm. I got tired of cutting hay. I was tired of farming, picking up eggs. That's what I'd done for 19 years. I told my father, when I graduated high school, I told him, I said, sorry, nah, Daddy, I'm gone. I won't be back to this farm. I'm moving to town. I'm going to be an old city boy. Well, I moved to town. I went to work to be a fireman for the city of Philadelphia. And when I was there, it was tough. Couldn't hardly make ends meet. So I called my father up. I said, you know, Daddy, I was a fool for leaving. I said, I'm coming back home. I want to be a farmer again because that's how I made my living. And so I come back home and I built 2 poultry farms. When I was 21 years old, I walked into a bank. I borrowed $500,000 on my name. And the reason I could do that was because there was a farm guarantee program through the federal government that guaranteed my loan. Now, folks, that is important to the people of Mississippi, especially to the rural people. I mean, the young people that's trying to get started in farming. Without the federal government's help, I would not have been able to borrow that money. That is one important issue we got to keep going. Also, we need to make our USDA offices stronger. We need to make sure that we keep all them little programs. How many of y'all borrowed the little fence money where you can put up a cross fence across your pasture, little fertilized money? The Delta over there gets the irrigation money on a regular basis. Them are the little programs that we need to keep going for our farmers. We need to take the irrigation money and move it over to the Knoxville County area, over on the eastern side of the state. We need to expand that because, look, it gets dry over there on the eastern side of the state just as well as it does in the western side. But them are the things, a lot of people look at that and they say, you know, that's just old welfare. That's welfare for the farmers. It's not welfare for the farmers because what you got to understand is we got less than half the farmers that we had 50 years ago feeding twice the amount of population. That's why it's very important for us to keep them programs going because the federal government knows our military is important. That is a national security issue, but farming is the most important because if we can't feed our military, if we can't eat, then we're not going to be successful. Then that's pretty much the end of the country. Other issues that affect Mississippi, the farmers of Mississippi, is the tariffs. Look, I don't know why in the world we even brought up the word tariff in America when it affects our farmers so much. I remember when soybeans was $4 or $5 a bushel. I remember that. And why would we bring up the tariff deal whenever we're selling most of our products overseas? The cotton industry would be affected. The corn industry, the soybean industry would be devastated if the other countries impose that on us. So I'm not for the tariffs. Immigration. Look, we need immigration in Mississippi. I'm for controlling immigration. If these illegal immigrants are over here, criminals, they're acting up, then they need to be sent back. I'm for that 100%. I'm for our border wall. Look, I'm for putting up a 10-strand electric fence. They're going to have to learn how to jump if they're going to get into America. I'm for that. We need to put it up wherever the border security folks say we need it. That's where we need to put it up. But we need to make sure our farmers in Vardaman have somebody pick them sweet potatoes. We need to make sure our watermelon growers down in Smith County have somebody to haul them watermelons. And we need to make sure our row crop farmers have help also. So I'm for, if the immigrants are coming over here working, paying taxes, I don't have a problem with it. If they're over here acting up, getting in trouble, then yeah, they need to be sent back. Another big thing we have is trade with Cuba. Look, that's a door that's opening every day. The problem we have with Cuba is they don't have any credit. So we need to do something in Washington to help the Cubans have a little credit so we can get a little more produce down there, a little more soybeans, a little more corn down there. We got a big market. A lot of people don't think this, India. We need to do something to open up the trade markets with India. You know, in India, they worship cows over there. But hey, they'll eat some chicken. We need to get some chicken over there, them folks, quick. That's what we need to do. Look, they'll eat chicken, they'll eat soybeans. We need to get it over there to them. So that's a big deal that we need to do is open up the trade, more trade. I want to help our farmers by doing more trade. Healthcare is a major issue in Mississippi, especially in rural America and rural Mississippi also. You might be a farmer out there with 2,000 acres of land, have all the equipment in the world, but if you get sick, if you come down with cancer, you get some type of medical, some kind of real serious illness, and you don't have insurance, then you're going to be affected. They're going to take pretty much everything you have because you can't do it. I grew up in rural Kemper County. We went 23 years without a hospital. We really didn't even have a drugstore in Kemper County. The only medicine we had was a little local Pentecostal preacher walked around with some of that oil in his pocket. If you got sick, he come and rubbed it on your head and he prayed for you until you get to a major medical hospital. That's all we had in Kemper County. So I know the effects of rural health care in Mississippi. It was bad. We've got a little local hospital. It's doing pretty good, but we need to expand that. The farmers in the Delta need rural health care. So I'm big on health care. I took a beating about my stance on health care, but I'm going to stand by it because rural Mississippi needs a good health care program. I'm for cutting regulations. Look, the Clean Water Act, everybody wants clean water, but that takes it too far on our farmers. It's just bad. The insecticide regulations, that takes everything too far. I'm for rolling back them regulations. Why in the world, if we out here trying to eat, why in the world do we have an Endangered Species Act where our farmers can't plant if they find something on the endangered species list within 50 miles of there? I can't understand that. So we need to do away with that. Labor regulations, if somebody wants to work on the farm, we need to let them go work on the farm. Just let them go work and make a decent wage and help the farmer out. So that's pretty much some of my ideas for running for Congress. I want to ask y'all to vote for me. Look, just vote for an old country boy. That's all I am. I'm not no rocket scientist. I'm just an old country boy that's trying to make a living like each and every one of y'all are doing. I want to go to Washington to represent y'all. I think I would do you a real good job. I don't play the party politics. I don't care less about the Democrats and the Republicans. All I care about is doing what's right for the people of my district, and that's what I'm going to do when I go to Washington. I'll help anybody in this room any way I can. And my wife wanted me to leave y'all with this thought. She said, please vote for me because she's tired of working them chicken houses. She's ready. Look, she's ready for something different. She was like me when I was 19. She's ready to move on out, and she's ready to move to town. So
I was thinking to say, if you go to Washington, she will go with you.
yeah, she's gonna go with me because she's sick of it. I'm telling you, she's ready to do something else. So. Look, thank y'all very much, and please remember me.
Thank you, sir. Our fifth speaker tonight is Michael Guest, running as a Republican. Guest is currently serving his third term as the district attorney for Madison and Rankin counties. District Attorney Guest also serves as the president of the Foundation of Rankin County Public Schools, and he serves on the boards of the state and the Central Mississippi Crime Stoppers organizations. As a member of Brandon Baptist Church, Guest serves as a Sunday school teacher and deacon. He's a Rankin County resident and a graduate of Brandon High School. He earned his accounting degree from Mississippi State University and his law degree from the University of Mississippi. He's a member of the Rankin County Bar Association and the Mississippi Bar Association. He's married to the former Haley Kennedy. They have two sons, Kennedy and Patton. Please welcome Republican candidate Michael Guest.
Good evening. I want to thank everyone for being here this evening. I want to thank Farm Bureau and their partners for sponsoring tonight's event. I have with me tonight my wife of 20 years, Haley, sitting right here on the front row. Behind her, I have my father, Pat Guest, and my father-in-law, Tommy Kennedy. We as a family for the last 3 months have been traveling throughout the 3rd Congressional District. We've been telling others about my background as a lifelong conservative Republican, and we've been letting the voters know where I stand on issues that are important to them, that are important to our state, and that are important to our nation. I've discussed my experience as a prosecutor and how for the last 22 years I've worked with our men and women of law enforcement to make sure that our communities remain great places to live and to worship and to raise a family. As district attorney, my office has prosecuted more than 20,000 felony cases. We've worked with law enforcement to return more than $20 million taken from those that would sell or transport illegal drugs. And our bad check unit has collected more than $3.5 million for our local businesses and merchants. As a prosecutor, I've often tackled complicated cases with many moving parts: armed robbery, sexual battery, capital murder. That has given me an understanding of a wide variety of issues. It's taught me to always be prepared. It's taught me to stand on my principles and to work with others to try to accomplish the right thing. I want to make a commitment to you. The same commitment that I've made to others throughout the campaign trail. First, I would humbly ask for your vote, and I would be honored for your consideration. I want to take my record of fighting for you, to fight for the people of the 3rd Congressional District, and to fight for our values. I believe that we need a congressman who has a proven record for fighting for what is right. We need a congressman who will work to see that tax cuts are not a one-time isolated event, but will work with our president to continue to lower taxes and reduce regulations. We need a congressman who will work with our farmers to see that their voice is heard in Washington, D.C. We need a congressman who will address the needs of our aging infrastructure, a congressman who will secure our border, a congressman who will work to keep drugs from entering our country. I believe in traditional family values. I believe in limited government. I believe in lower taxes. I believe in a strong national defense. I believe in honoring the promise that we've made our veterans. I believe in fighting for the rights of the unborn, and I believe in protecting our Second Amendment rights. If you send me to Congress, I will work hard every day to make you proud. I will work to see that we leave a better country for our children and grandchildren. And I will work to see that we will forever remain one nation under God. My views of agriculture are shaped by my unofficial agriculture advisor, the man sitting on the 2nd row behind my wife, my father-in-law of 20 years, Tommy Kennedy. He grew up farming, cotton, soybean. He's raised cattle. He's raised poultry. For more than 20 years, he was in the farm supply business. And now he's in the forestry business, having hundreds of acres that are planted in southern pine. He has taught me the importance of agriculture to our economy and to our community. As I've traveled throughout the congressional district, I've spoken with many people. This week, I spoke with the Rhodes family. The Rhodes, generations of farmers. In talking to them, I heard something that I hear time and time again. Something that affects not only agriculture, but affects each and every one of us, whether we're in the agriculture community or in another community. When talking to them about their needs and what Washington can do for them, it's all about regulations. We as a country are overregulated. Our federal government has intruded in our lives. They've intruded in our lives personally, and they've intruded in our lives professionally. They want to tell us what kind of insurance we have to buy. As farmers, they want to tell you what kind of crops you need to raise. They want to control our waterways. As congressman, I would work to repeal or replace the waters of the United States, a bill that affects our farmers, in which the EPA is trying to regulate our creeks, regulate our streams, regulate our ponds, regulate our lakes. They want to claim that they're navigable waterways. And for farmers, they then want to be able to tell you what you can and cannot do with your land and your property. I think that you should be able to make that decision. As a farmer, you should be able to decide what you want to do, and we need to get the federal government out of the way. Immigration. I met several weeks ago with Bill Rivers. I saw Mr. Rivers here earlier. Immigration is a hot button topic. I think we're all against illegal immigration. No one wants to see illegal immigrants coming into our country. We want to secure our borders against not only illegal immigration, but against the flow of drugs coming into our country. But at the same time, we have a great need for legal immigration, the H-2A visa program. In speaking with Mr. Rivers, as I toured his facility, as I saw what he does, how he produces the very ferns that you see here in front of you, as I toured his facility, he told me of the need for agriculture workers and how important that program was to him, how important that was to what he did, and how without that program he is unable to find the labor that he needs. Our Congressman Trent Kelly has recently introduced a bill that would reform the H-2A program, that would make it more farmer-friendly. And so if I have the ability to go to Congress, I want to work with Congressman Kelly. I want to see that program is expanded. I want to see that we are able to provide to the farmers the workforce that they need to grow and to produce their crops. And then finally, the Farm Bill. We see just this week the House version of the Farm Bill passed out of the Ag Committee. It will be passed now onto the House floor, where it will be negotiated. And then that bill will be sent to the Senate. They will pass a version, and at some point before the end of the year, we will have a new Farm Bill. I believe that it is important that we have a Farm Bill that puts farmers first. If we can pass a $1.3 trillion omnibus bill, if we can fund all sorts of domestic programs, I believe that we need to be able to adequately fund our farm needs. I believe that there are two important needs that should be addressed by Congress. The first is our defense needs. We need to make sure that our men and women in our military have the training and the equipment that they need to go out and perform a dangerous mission, that when they put their lives on the line, that they have what they need to return home safely. But a second thing we need to make sure that we fund is our farmers, the people that put food on our table. So often we go to the grocery store or we go to a restaurant, and many of us, many times myself, don't think of all the hard work that goes into preparing that meal. The sweat, the time that is spent time and time again working to make sure that food is not only produced, but that food then makes it onto our table. And so it is important for us to support our farmers. There will be people on this stage tonight who will have a much more diverse agriculture background than myself. But I will promise you this: your concerns are my concerns. Your issues are my issues. And so while there may be others who will be able to come up here and talk about their experience in farming, I will make this promise to you, that I will listen to your concerns. I will work hard to educate myself on issues as it relates to agriculture, and that you will find no one else in Congress who will fight harder for you than I will.
You have about 30 seconds left. One of the things you talk about the Farm Bill passing out of the Senate, out of the House Ag Committee, the provisions for farm programs pretty much were level funded. The contention was on the SNAP side, the food stamp side, where Republicans are wanting to put more work requirements. And the Democrats are against that. So it passed out on a party line vote, Democrats against, Republicans for. What would be your, how would you get around that and get a farm bill passed? Because it's got to be passed by the end of September.
The farm bill should not be a partisan issue. The farm bill should be an issue that we, as both Republicans and Democrats, should be able to work together to accomplish what's best for our country. And again, I believe that outside of funding our military, properly funding our farm bill should be the second priority that we should be facing in Congress.
All right, sir. Your 10 minutes is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next candidate is Whit Hughes, running as a Republican. Hughes was born and raised in Jackson. He earned undergraduate degrees and a Master of Business Administration degree at Mississippi State University. And if that wasn't enough at MSU, he also played 2 years of baseball and 5 years of basketball for Ron Polk and Richard Williams. After college, Hughes served as the Deputy Director of the Republican National Committee's Eagles program and as the Finance Director of Elizabeth Dole's first U.S. Senate campaign. Eventually, Hughes returned home to Mississippi, where he worked as Finance Director for Haley Barbour's gubernatorial campaign in 2003. He served afterwards in the Deputy Director position of the Mississippi Development Authority. Since 2013, he's worked as Foundation President and Chief Development Officer for Baptist Health Systems. Hughes and Shelley, his wife of 20 years, reside in Madison with their 3 children, Philip, Pax, and Presley. The Hughes are members of Highlands Presbyterian Church in Ridgeland. Please welcome Republican candidate Whit Hughes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Artis. And Mike and Farm Bureau, thank you for pulling together tonight's event. This is a great opportunity as a candidate. You want to get in front of voters and let them have an opportunity to hear directly from you and make a determination on who they feel like is best for this position. I want to recognize my wife, Shelley, who's here in the audience, and make sure she knows how much I love and appreciate her. Shelley and I are both from this area. We both went to Mississippi State. As you heard, I got undergraduate and graduate degrees there while playing baseball and basketball. We've been married for 20 years and have been living in Madison with our 3 kids since 2003. You heard a little bit about my background, conservative politics on national, state, and local levels, economic development experience as Deputy Director of Mississippi Development Authority. I've had my own consulting business. In recent years, I was Chief Development Officer at Baptist Health Systems here in Jackson. And I resigned from that position 12 weeks ago to enter this race. So I make a joke when I meet with folks because I tell them, I enjoy being married, I have 3 kids, and I'm out of a job. So I'm pretty serious about this. But I made it clear from day one that I'm going to work hard in all 24 counties in this race. And so you asked us to speak a little bit to why we're in this race. And so I'll just tell this audience, I'm driven by faith and family. I believe I'm answering a call to service. Shelley and I feel led in this direction. We feel prepared for this. And we believe I'm the best person for the job. And we believe I'll be successful for the same reasons I've been successful with everything else in life. And that is I'm willing to outwork people around me. I'm doing that right now. I've been campaigning since 12 weeks ago in all 24 counties. And we've been working hard. In fact, Shelley and I just 2 weeks ago campaigned in all 24 counties, and we did it in just 48 hours. So a lot of hard work, but a lot of fun too. And we're still happily married. I guess as of about 30 minutes ago we were. And so that's kind of reflective of where we are in this campaign. For the first 60 days, I traveled around helping people learn more about me and why I'm running. Now I'm talking a lot about what I'm for and what I'll do representing this district in Congress. I've released Whit's game plan, kind of a snapshot of my policy priorities. And so, Artis, we clearly don't have time to touch on all those issues tonight. But I do want this audience to know that in Congress, I'm going to fight for more jobs and a stronger economy. Lower taxes, fewer regulations. Let's get the federal government out of the way so we have a chance to be successful. Look what's going on right now with the tax reform that was just passed. Lower taxes for businesses of all sizes. Touched 80% of Americans in a positive way. And so what have the results been? You've seen bonuses. You've seen increased wages, increased benefits, increased optimisms with business owners. We need to have more of that. I'm going to focus on immigration reform and border security. Border security is not a partisan issue. This is a national security issue. I believe that we need to build a wall where a wall makes sense logistically, and where it doesn't, we need to use technology. We need to have boots on the ground. We need to have boats in the water, more resources at checkpoints. But we're a nation of immigrants. We need a laws and rules-driven process that will allow the best and the brightest to come here and contribute to society. We need an efficient and effective work visa program that allow folks to come here for periods of time and work in our states like ours and be monitored along the way. So we got to be better on immigration and border security. I'm going to fight debt and spending. I'm very concerned about where we are from that standpoint. If you look at our debt right now, you're talking about $21 trillion in debt. 10 years ago when Obama got elected, we were at $10 trillion. If you look at our budget now, we're spending $4.4 trillion and we're bringing in $3.4 trillion. So we're adding another trillion to that number, and we're spending 300-something billion this year in interest and have nothing to show for those dollars. So anybody in a family or a small business knows we can't keep going in that direction. And it's interesting to note that over 50% of our debt is tied to entities associated with retirement for Americans. Whether you're talking about the Social Security Trust Fund or mutual funds or public and private pension funds. So if we risk defaulting on any level, we're not only going to alienate ourselves with other countries around the world, we're going to risk impacting current and future retirees in a negative way. And I just think that's unacceptable. I'm going to support our military and our veterans. We have to give our military the resources they need to fulfill their missions and be successful. We have assets in the 3rd District that could be at risk in the next round of base realignment and closure. We need a person in Congress who understands the importance of that topic and understands how to get communities prepared for a potential next round of BRAC. We need somebody that understands the importance of paying attention to the priorities of our National Guard. The 3rd District footprint, from a Guard perspective, is the biggest footprint in the state, and it gets $600 million a year from the federal government. So we have to continue to sustain those resources. And I'm gonna campaign in, and I'm gonna work hard for all 24 counties, every community and every county in this district. The hard worker that you're seeing on the campaign trail right now is gonna be the same hard worker serving you in Congress. Now, I do want to touch on some issues specific to that group with the rest of my time. And I'm going to state the obvious.
Got about 4.5 minutes.
Okay. I'm going to state the obvious and just say that clearly ag and natural resources are the backbone of the 3rd District. For that matter, the backbone of our state. And so we have to have a champion. That's not to suggest that the members of our congressional delegation right now don't make these issues a priority, but we have to have a champion. For a long time, we've always known Thad Cochran as that champion, and he's recently stepped down. So whoever represents this district has to be a champion for ag and natural resources. Now, I'm not going to be up here and try to be clever and convince you that I'm an expert on issues like the waters of the U.S. or drift or traceability. I'm generally familiar with those issues, but I'll tell you, I know how to surround myself with good people. I know how to receive input from trusted voices like Farm Bureau. So let me just quickly roll through some issues here. First point I'll make is that government doesn't create a job, but I do think a member of Congress can help create the kind of environment that business owners appreciate. We have to do better in our tax and regulatory climate. We talked a little bit earlier about tax reform. In last night's debate, in terms of deregulation, we talked about Dodd-Frank. I think that's relevant for this audience. I mean, this is an area where they're trying to regulate the banking industry, but it ends up crippling Main Street. Our community banks are the lifeblood of our communities. And so 28,000 regulations later, instead of being able to hire more loan officers to give farmers and business owners access to capital, they're having to buy more accountants and compliance officers just to deal with the federal government. I think that's unacceptable. Transportation infrastructure. I can tell you from firsthand experience as an economic developer, I understand how important that is. You in this audience and others under the Farm Bureau umbrella, I understand you have to have good roads and bridges and rail and ports and airports. We have to do better, be more efficient, eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse, cut down the time it takes on permitting related to transportation projects, find those savings and reinvest them in those projects so you have the infrastructure you need to be successful, to bring materials in, to get finished goods and products out and serve your marketplace. Trade. I will tell you that I support the president and I want him to be successful because that means our country and our state have a chance to be successful. But I break from the president a little bit on this topic. I'm very concerned about what's going on right now with trade wars and tariffs. I do not think that's a good thing. for jobs and commodity prices. I think you can look at what's going on right now with China as an example. I believe I'm correct in saying that China is our second biggest importer of our soybeans. You know, if we price ourselves out of the market, so to speak, I'm quite certain there are growers and producers in South America that'll be glad to step into that gap. So we got to have more trade opportunities, but they have to be free and fair. And it makes perfect sense to renegotiate NAFTA. I mean, it's 30 plus years old. I think it's perfectly reasonable to renegotiate NAFTA. Rural development. I'm not going to get too detailed on this topic, but rural development is important in our communities. And one big thing we have to focus on is broadband. We have to have more high-speed fiber and broadband capacity and capability in our communities. Lastly, I will say we have to have a congressman that understands the importance of sustaining research and development funding. That is so critical. You know, I was reading some information about seed research. I'm not an expert on seed research. I know higher yields are a good thing in a competitive global economy. But we have to have these resources. And that doesn't have just direct impact, it has second and third tier impact in our communities. And I saw some numbers where 10 years ago, China and the US were spending $5 billion each on research and development. 10 years later, we're still spending 5 and China's spending 10. That's not acceptable. So I'm running out of time, so let me finish with this. Somebody asked me the other day if I'd taken a poll in this race. And I told them I don't have to. I am a poll. There's no better survey than talking to a candidate who's been everywhere in his or her district. And I can tell you that voters want somebody with character and integrity, somebody focused on jobs and economy, a strong leader with some backbone that values principles over politics, and somebody that will actually engage in the process and drive conservative legislation that aligns with priorities that people like you and I identify with.
All right.
I want to be that leader, and I'd like to have your support in this race. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Our seventh candidate, Perry Parker, is running as a Republican. Parker lives in Seminary. His family has deep roots in Covington County and District 3. After completing grade school at Sumrall Attendance Center, Parker moved to Pearl River Junior College, before he transferred to the University of Southern Mississippi, where he earned a bachelor's degree in finance cum laude. He went on to earn a master's of business administration from the University of Chicago. Parker and his brother now manage the cattle farm, their family's cattle farm down at Seminary. Along with a group of Hattiesburg area businessmen, Parker helped start the first, a national banking association, where he currently serves as director emeritus. Parker and Ida, his wife of 30 years, have 2 sons, Bo and Harry. Please welcome Republican candidate Perry Parker.
Thank you, everyone.
Why are you running for Congress?
Running for Congress because Mississippi has been good to me. I led with Mississippi around the world, and it was a big advantage, because if you're in Germany or London, not a lot of people from Mississippi start talking about Mississippi and growing up on a farm in Mississippi, and they remember it, and it kind of took you to the front of the line. So now that I'm home, retired from financial services businesses, I see so much opportunity here. I think with my experience, I can help to grow this economy, both the farm economy and the economy overall.
What about an ag priority? I mean, you've been involved in the cattle business. You've been overseas some. What would be an ag policy priority for you?
I think the first priority is the timber market in primarily the southwest part of the state, but overall the whole part of the state. You know, there have been 6 major mill announcements in Louisiana, Alabama, Florida in the last at least 18 months, maybe in the last year, and we haven't had one here in Mississippi. Now, there are reasons for that, but I think it's not entirely clear. We have the raw material. I think we can use this office and go to the investment community and point out the opportunities there. And growing the timber market, that's one. Regulations, be it poultry industry, regulations as to distributing litter. I see these regulations, they actually have the power to close family farms, and that is near and dear to my heart. That's how I grew up and the best part of my children's life. And I think regulations are closing family farms, and I think this office has the power to change some of that, and that'll be a priority.
A lot of farmers are concerned with there's one thing about NAFTA, everybody loved to cuss it, but then again, it's actually, when you reopen something, the unknown is even worse perhaps. Although NAFTA has been good, corn farmers, poultry farmers, and Mexico and Canada are, if you look in the top two markets in for the United States, they are those countries. What's your opinion on reopening the NAFTA and how to keep agriculture from being a pawn that would perhaps get swallowed up in some of the larger industrial concerns in the United States?
I think reopening NAFTA could absolutely be a positive. I think that's where President Trump shines in renegotiation and pointing out our priorities. And by the way, Canada needs us and Mexico must have us. Plan A, B, and C for Mexico is to trade with the United States. So reopening NAFTA is going to be a good thing. It's going to be a good thing for farmers. I think the bigger issue is tariffs. I support President Trump. I do not support tariffs. I think that that puts farmers very much at risk. And the role of this congressional office is to point that out and make sure that President Trump and the White House know that farmers are at risk and Mississippi farmers at risk with some of these negotiations with China.
How about rural internet, rural connectivity, not only for our farmers, but rural hospitals, rural businesses?
In my home in Seminary, Mississippi?
There you go. I've been through seminary. How can you, or what could you think we could do to increase connectivity in the 3rd District?
Well, spending a fair amount of time speaking to some of the rural electric cooperatives. I think they have a very good plan. And do you know that the federal government subsidizes some of the major carriers, such as AT&T, to $300 million plus? I think it's $6 billion in total in subsidies that are supposed to go to rural broadband, and we're not getting value for that. And the definition of rural broadband is not clear from some of these large carriers. And I think it's time for rural electric cooperatives to get a slice of that money. And this office can help with that.
How about in terms of the EPA? President Trump's administration has rolled back some EPA regulations that farmers considered onerous, of course, one of them being the waters of the U.S. If you were elected, what would be your attitude towards the rollback of these regulations? Or do you have anything specific that you would try to work on?
Sure. Well, first of all, I support Scott Pruitt and the work that he's done so far. He's made a lot of progress. Second of all, regulation's incredibly important. I touched on poultry. I touched on having the electronic logging devices on trucks. I don't think the Department of Transportation understands how that impacts livestock farmers and how it impacts real lives. And I believe all we're doing is kicking the can down the road there. This office, the congressman who goes to Washington, one of these 8 candidates, which I believe it will be me, will have an opportunity to impact the electronic logging device regulation, and I think that's one of them will be my priority on day one.
How about immigration reform? We'll let you solve that in a few minutes. A lot of farmers in the United States still need access to temporary migrant labor through things like the H-2A and such as that. As Congress takes up irrigation reform, how would you help defend access to those kinds of programs or come up with something new that could benefit farmers? Because labor for vegetable crops and such is a hard thing.
Absolutely, and I believe I heard this first from Mike McCormick, and so we'll go ahead and give Mike credit for it, and that was we can either import our food or we can import our labor, and I know which one I want to import. Let's work on the labor, and it's up to Congress to rewrite immigration reform. It's not going to be easy, and by the way, maybe some of the congressmen will be at risk, but what has to happen is we have to come up with a program that costs less to come up with temporary guest workers as well as longer workers that are here in excess of a year. It's a matter of Congress sitting down and writing the regulation. Now, of course, that goes, President Trump is working on enforcing the rules so that illegal immigration does not happen and we build a wall. They all three of those things go hand in hand, but the main thing is Congress has to rewrite immigration rules.
The Farm Bill passed out of the House Ag Committee yesterday on a partisan vote. Republicans for, Democrats were against. The problem is not so much over the farm program part of the bill, which is only like, 13% of the total cost of the bill, 87% being SNAP, the food stamp, so-called food stamp
Is it
portion.
87%?
It's pretty high. It is the majority. The Republicans have wanted more work requirements with that, and it does seem to be a real sticking point. How could you make sure that we could get a farm bill passed by the end of September?
Well, it's no secret. With my agricultural background, I will focus on ag issues. Look, I am a Mississippi farmer first and foremost. I've traded financial products around the world with the lessons I learned right here on my brother's cattle businesses and in my cattle businesses. That served me well. I think it'll serve me well fighting for farmers in the 3rd District. My first thought as a congressman will be, how do the decisions I make in any vote impact farmers in the 3rd District? I can say that because I am one. My family are farmers. So to your point on the Farm Bill, look, we've got to sit down, SNAP. There are too many, there's waste in that program. There's waste in even the farm part of the program in ethanol. I think I can impact both of those.
But this is the first time, though, that the Farm Bill generally has been free of partisan rancor, but this time the Democrats on the House Ag Committee have really expressed some strong opinions. How can you overcome that, to reach across the aisle to get a Farm Bill passed?
Well, clearly I've worked with Yankees all my life. I married one.
Then you have an advantage.
So look, part of this job is to work with the people from New York, Colorado, California, and I'm absolutely equipped to do that. It's what I've done all my life.
Let's see, what haven't we talked about? 30 seconds. You got 30 seconds.
Well, we do want to end quickly because I was able to go around the corner and I've been eating catfish for the last few minutes. Look, a couple of priorities.
You didn't bring me in?
A couple of priorities for me. There's no question, guys. I do stand for term limits. I believe it is a concrete way to help President Trump drain the swamp. And I do want to leave you with something that for Mississippi to do better, we have to do something different. And I believe that we can grow this economy at a faster rate than we have been. That includes the farm economy as well as the overall economy in Mississippi. It's time for Mississippi to do better, and I can be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our last candidate tonight is Catherine Tate, running as a Republican. A native of Tupelo, Tate began her professional career at age 18 as a musician and choreographer, dancing for Topaz Productions designing for Topaz Productions based in Memphis. She completed her bachelor's degree in the School of Art, Architecture, and Design at Mississippi State University. Tate went on to earn a master's degree at the University of Texas. She taught in the public schools of Jackson for 16 years. She served as Mississippi's first statewide arts education supervisor, a position developed by the state legislature. She also worked for McGraw-Hill Publishing, headquartered in Dallas. Please welcome Republican candidate Catherine Tate.
So glad to be here. There are a lot of reasons that I'm running, but primarily because I experienced firsthand throughout my career how government has gotten out of control with regard to its fundamental, original purpose and mission. You know, our government has very limited and prescribed duties. And if people don't keep a check on it, it just has a tendency to get out of control. and working especially in the classroom, experiencing federal regulations, how that personally affected my life, when I got to a point that I could take a break and run for office and see if there was something I could do beyond just complain, then I decided to go for it. And, you know, I just heard something recently. Every time you curse the darkness, you should always light a candle. So I do try to do that and offer not just complaining about government, but what are some solutions that might fix it. Let me just read something to you, if you would. I'm so glad to be here with all of you representing farmers. I walked over to use the restroom at the museum over there, and I noticed a statue outside of a farmer reading a Bible. And that, I just almost wanted to cry. I've never noticed it as many times as I've been here, but allow me to just read this little paragraph that I thought about when I knew I was going to come to speak to you. Man was made from earth and placed with animals in a garden. And while the image of a garden conjures lovely idyllic utopia with fragrant flowers and a hammock for lounging, anyone who works directly with the elements knows that it is a battlefield. And in fact, the original Hebrew word for garden, by its root, implies a fortress or a place to be protected. And farmers, you know all too well that defending and fortifying your land is exactly what is involved. Defending and fortifying requires an aggressive war against never-ending attacks from multiple intruders, insects, disease, weeds. The fruit of your labor requires overcoming increasingly and immeasurable, overwhelming, seemingly insurmountable odds, I am sure. To meet this challenge, man must be stronger and wiser than all the elements. But the grace of God is even greater than those odds, and you prove it every day. So I do thank you for the work that you do. I'm applying for a job to represent you, and you all primarily are lobbyists. Let's just remind ourselves where you get your fundamental rights to be a lobbyist. Does anyone recall in the Constitution where that is? You may not have thought about that for a long time. I had not until I taught government briefly. I taught mostly art, but I did have the opportunity to teach government for a couple of years, social studies. Well, it's in the First Amendment, which was passed in 1789, and it's that right to petition government. But it's not the right to petition government for favored status or handouts or to minimize the risk of a certain industry. It's to petition government for, do you recall the rest of that First Amendment? It is to petition government for redress of grievances. So when I was looking through this wonderful briefing book that was provided, in each of the issues I thought, well, is that really addressing a redress of grievances, or is it asking for favorable treatment? Is it asking for a reduction of risks? Is it asking for bailouts or anything like that? I mean, I have to, and the job I'm applying for as a representative, I have to think about those things. In addition to teaching, I also went through training to be an independent auditor, and I love that work. It's analyzing policy in schools and organizations, and there are 5 standards, and those are good 5 standards to look at every piece of policy and legislation, and they involve, number 1, is the organization in control of itself? Number 2, or does it have that policy in place, the mission statement, if you will? Number 2, is that policy disseminated equally among all parties? Number 3, is it applied equitably among all parties? Number 4, is the product or service that is the mission of the organization reflective accurately of the mission? And number 5, do you frequently assess to see whether or not that product or service is accurately reflecting the mission. It's just very common sense. So those are the type things that I look for in policy and organizations, and I just love that kind of work. I've developed policy proposals and implemented policy and developed legislative proposals and had the fortune to see them come to fruition, working with legislators out of Brookhaven, as a matter of fact. So I just enjoy the work, and I hope I would have an opportunity to work with you on farm policy and legislation.
What do you think you could bring to farm policy that perhaps somebody else might not? What would be, if you got to Washington, how would you develop an ag policy that you would want to move forward?
I would listen to the lobbyists as far as what the interests and concerns are, and then again, I would be that voice of the legislator who has to say, these are the limits. These are the limits. It will be a balancing act. It will be getting together with like-minded legislators, forming in coalitions, and I'm sure there are already great partnerships in operation.
There's been a lot of concern in ag lately about some of the tariffs that, we have 3 minutes, that President Trump has proposed, not so much about him, but the fact that ag could easily be, when counter tariffs are proposed, ag products that are, and of course export market is very big for U.S. agriculture, that they could be hurt. In terms of trying to battle that and opening back up the North American Free Trade Agreement for negotiation, what would be your guiding policies in trying to move that forward?
I see that the NAFTA agreements worked well for the farming industry, and I'll just say the same thing that I've said all along. The tariffs were a necessary evil that has to happen right now for where we've been for the past 10, 15, 20 years. And I would hope and pray that the agriculture industry saw that coming and would be prepared to weather that storm, as I believe full well that it will all even out, because we need not just free trade but fair trade and fair partnerships.
Immigration reform, agriculture has a big stake in that because a lot of hand-intensive labor, such as vegetables and fruits, and such as that. So H-2A and those sorts of temporary visa for migrant workers, that's big to a lot of agriculture because of the fact they just can't get the labor otherwise. How would you work to try to make immigration reform move forward, but for agriculture to not get lost in all the coming and going?
Well, I see that the mandatory E-Verify is cumbersome for the agriculture industry, and I also see that the application time is very cumbersome. The 22 days, I was very surprised on that, but I also see that you have figured out some wonderful solutions that sound excellent to me, reducing that time to get the workers, expanding those who qualify to work in different industries, and enabling multi-employer joint contracts. I think you've done a wonderful job offering solutions, and I would certainly love to work with you on seeing those implemented. The C, I believe, policy sounds
You got
excellent.
about 45 seconds left. What would you like to leave our voters with?
Well, I would just absolutely love working with you. I love working on policy and legislation. I could be the voice of that conservative, pulling the brakes when we need to, while also listening to the needs of Mississippians in the 3rd Congressional District. I just learned that the poultry industry here is the largest in the nation. So I'm just thankful to be here with you, and thank you for the opportunity to meet you, and I hope I get to work with you on all these issues soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.